Hey everyone, how's it going today? Thanks for joining in. I appreciate it. So, first off, I think as things start to open up, thank you once again for taking the time to be here. I have a new course coming out in TrueFire, so I want to talk a little bit about that. And it's more about a conceptual idea. It's called Solo Explorer, and it's a rock course, which a lot of courses I do in TrueFire are blues courses, but this one's a rock one. So it's kind of been fun because I'm starting to expand more out into that. So right now it's 25% off, and if you just enter live 25 and there's a link, if you want to get the course, I really appreciate if you bought it through that link. That's in the description here. I'd really be great if you could do that. And thanks to everyone who joined me with Robin 4 this past weekend, which was a ton of fun. Coming up this weekend is Scott Sherrard on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And then the following week is Andy Wood, and Josh Smith after that. And then the return of Jason Laughlin, because Jason was my first guest, and we've worked out the audio and video quite a bit since then, so he wanted a redo. So I gave him a redo. Okay, so what is this idea of this Solo Explorer course? Well, it's how I look at soloing. And I've taken a bunch of really common chord progressions that we've probably heard, famous rock tunes, and kind of borrowed them, and how we can investigate, how we can step outside of the pentatonic scale to make things more interesting. Or starting off with the pentatonic scale being the basis of everything and how we can build upon that. And it really kind of builds upon what I've been talking about a lot here in the lockdown. So the first thing we always want to do is look at the chord progression. And as a guitar player, I'm always thinking about pentatonic scales. That's like my main thing, right? We always just kind of default to them. And sometimes the pentatonic scale can sound a bit samey, or we're leaving, as the expression goes, money on the table if we're not digging a little deeper. All right, so the concept is a bunch of different things. So the first thing is we always want to look at our chord progression. So what I've given you here is a bonus tune. This one didn't make it to the course just because I had too many, and we just decided to choose on tempos and keys and things like that. So this is basically the same chord progression as Lions by Dire Straits off of their first record. And I'm a huge Mark Knopfler fan. And if we just look through the chord progression, you got the link right there for my Dropbox. That should be working, and that will be, yeah, I think it's working. All right, so the chords, let me just run through them. I don't have a chart for it. You guys can hear it or watch this. It's B minor to D major, A, G7, okay? Then we have B minor, D, A, E7. So we have some cool stuff going on there. First of all, it's a great chord progression. Okay, so first thing my mind works at is, okay, what pentatonic scale is going to work over this whole thing? And that's going to be B minor pentatonic. So let's just take a listen to that. I play B minor straight on. Okay, so I'm going to try to find, that sounds good, right? So I want to use that as the basis of everything because it's guitar, it's rock and roll, it's what feels good to me. If you listen to the version of that song, the original version, Mark Knopfler plays very much out of the pentatonic scale. And with, of course, all due respect, he doesn't hit some of the notes that he could hit. So I don't mean that. He's one of my favorite players. You guys understand what I'm saying. He took a solo. It's great. God, I wish I wrote that song. And but there's a few things that if you want to dig a little deeper are some options that you can do. So the first thing I would say, as we've said, like is kind of a constant theme through many of the things that I teach, I want to look at my chords. So what notes are in, and this is what the course talks about, how to methodically take apart a chord progression and see where the trouble spots are or see how we can add to it. So the first thing, I have a B minor chord, which is spelled, you want to write this out, B, D, F sharp, right? Next chord is D major, D, F sharp, and A. A major, A, C sharp, E, and then we go to G7, G, B, D, F. Well, you could probably hear if you're listening or if you paying attention, so our B minor chord has an F sharp in it. Might be D, F sharp. Our D major chord has an F sharp, and it's the third, D, F sharp, and A. A major, A, C sharp, E, we're good. G major is G, B, D, or it's G, B, D, F, the G7 chord. So, well, this F is suddenly not in our pentatonic scale, right? It's not in our B minor pentatonic scale. It's the flat 5, it's the blue note, but it's not in the scale. And it's also not in the key, because if we're looking at what key we're in here, we end up being in the key of B minor, B Aeolian. So let me just play a B Aeolian scale here. Right, then again. Now we got a problem here. Right, so because we have, now when we get to that next chord, we have a G sharp in our E chord. So we want to pay attention to that as well. So the first thing I'm going to think about doing is just getting comfortable with playing as many cool B minor pentatonic and blues licks as I can. I don't mean licks, just experiment with B minor and all the cool things that you can do with that. So in the course, and what I'm talking about here is that's what I lay out first. I'm thinking about, okay, I'm going to play around a B minor pentatonic. What can I do to make it sound nice? So the next thing we can do is just think about what notes we can hit in each chord. So in B minor pentatonic, we have B, D, E, F sharp, A, B, D, E, F sharp, A, right? So B minor is spelled B, D, F sharp. So I can think about those notes sort of right in my scale. And I can go to D major, if I want to even look at this. There's a D major chord in the first inversion. F sharp, A, and D. My A chord, I have a C sharp. Then if I slide that down a whole step to my G chord, I have the B right there. So I can get this kind of... So by looking at the chords and how they move, I can just go through those sounds. So let's do that. So I'm just going to follow the chord. I'm going to follow this. All right, just checking out those notes. So I have B and D, which is my root and my flat third of my B minor chord. To my D chord here, and I'm going to just play the 5 and the root, and then I'm going to move down. And I have the A and the C sharp from the A chord, and I'm going to bring it down a whole step from G to B. All right, so let's check it out. Play those notes. Oh, wrong chord. Sorry, messed that up. Oops. Okay, now we have an E chord that has a G sharp in it. Watch. Watch. To the G. Now the G sharp's coming. Here's that E, the G sharp. Mixing the blues scale. So you see what's going on. I'm thinking of the chord shape as I go down. I'm just going to envision the chord right underneath my fingers. And you get these lines that are built into the chord progression because you're playing the chord tones. Now if I do the second half, which I didn't do before, the B minor to D major, A major, now the E major. So there's my G sharp right there. So by targeting some of those notes from the chords, that I've called another course is chord tone soloing, I'm starting to dig into the chord changes at a deeper level. And if I just start to mix that with a pentatonic scale, I could start to target those notes. So once again, the overall sound is going to be pentatonic. Now, in the course, and what I'm talking about here, we're really starting to get a bit into modal sounds, but I don't think modally. I understand it intellectually, of course, that I know technically we're going from B Aeolian to B Dorian on this song when you go to that E chord. I don't think about it that way because then as guitar players, a lot of times we learn fingerings and you might know a Dorian fingering or an Aeolian fingering, and then you're trying to move that fingering around, and it just kind of sucks, actually, when you think that way. I find it to be really hard to work through the guitar and play that way. So what we want to do, like I said, is to think about those chords, those notes as they go by in the chord, and target them as opposed to thinking about changing scales. We're just hitting the right note at the right time. Okay, so what I end up doing too, and I talk a little bit about this in the course, is like I'm always seeing those triad motions. So there we just moved up to the next set of strings. So even as a rhythm guitar player, which is totally cool, I can have fun with that. Right, so I'm thinking about those chord shapes now, how I can use those in my soloing as well. So if I think B minor pentatonic, so what's going on too is I'm thinking the B minor pentatonic, and around it I can see those other notes from the chords. So it basically comes down to, if we're thinking notes out of the key, a pentatonic scale, well, not out of the key, let me rephrase that. A pentatonic scale is a minor scale or a major scale without the half steps. So the reason why a pentatonic scale works so well, for the most part, is we're often leaving out the problematic notes, which can be the half steps. You ever notice sometimes you're playing and you're like, oh, that should work, but that doesn't work. So even in this case, this G note, which is a great note on the G chord, but it's not such a great note on the B minor. I'm going to play it so you can hear it. Not so great on the D, right? Nope, but on the G7, because you're playing the chord. Now, F sharp, and that's kind of cool. Then, now what did I do there? Well, this note right now, I put in the F on the G7 chord because it's in the chord. Well, if I think about the F in a B minor pentatonic scale, it's the blue note. So it's a really cool opportunity to throw in a blue note. Let's hear that. 1, 2, 3. Now, what I did there was I used it as a blue note, that F. Then when I went to the G7 chord, I resolved that F. So in taking apart the way you look at the chord progression and just deconstruct it. So what I'm getting at, well, maybe convoluted at the moment, is I look at the chord progression, I try to deconstruct it in every way I can. So the first thing I will do, what pentatonic scale works well over the whole thing? B minor pentatonic. You want to spend the time really messing with that because that's home base. And then secondly, then I look at the chord progression. And I would say, okay, these are my notes in the chord progression. You can write them out on a piece of paper if you're not familiar with the notes. And find the notes that are contained in both the B minor pentatonic scale and the chords, because many of those notes will be there. Because as guitar players, when we're thinking pentatonic scales, we often just play blues licks and play lots of roots. And if we do that, we're missing out on some really nice notes. So that D is the third of the chord. Root there. I'm going to down half step. Oh, sorry. A. So B, pentatonic scale. D. How about E for the A chord? There's that. So right there, run up the scale. There's B minor. Oh, my phone is ringing. Oh yeah, didn't turn my phone off. Good for me. Hold on. Don't do that. You guys ever have this problem on? I turned my phone off on the computer, and it didn't go off. So there we go. All right, let me do that. I love how these things are alive. This is awesome. He's going to call back, and I'm going to not want him to call back. Hold on, guys. This is awesome. How's everybody doing? While I turn off this. All right. It's live. Oh, God. That's what I'm talking about. All right. I hate Apple sometimes. I love it. All right. This is cool. All right. How do I turn that off? All right, one more time, guys. I'm going to try to do this. Preferences. Turn off FaceTime. There we go. Good stuff. All right. So, once again, I'm going to try to find the notes where they played in the B minor chord. Going up to the D for my D chord. My A chord is next, so I have an E. And then went back down to the D. So, that top again. Live TV. 2, 3, 4. Now my third. All pentatonic, right? So pretty cool. Then I'm gonna stay in that E. I can mix it around in music. Right? So I'm not always landing on those roots of the E, which has always been my, when I'm not thinking, my go-to. Okay, so that's the first thing. Just find out where those are. So now if you're not familiar with your chord tones and what the chords the notes of the chords, just play the chord. So once again, I'm going to play those chords over the top. B minor. A, G, E, chords, A, B minor, D, A. Oop. All right, so at that point, I'm just going to play the chord and see how the motion of the chord moves across the neck. So we put those all together. What you've ended up doing is you've changed modes, you've outlined the sound of the chord progression, and by deconstructing it, and taking time and seeing what notes are in each of the chords, what are the common notes, what are notes of the A minor pentatonic scale that are in the chord, or the B minor pentatonic scale, excuse me, that are in the chord. What I end up seeing is what my options are. And that's what this is all about, you know. We know we can play the blues scale, so what the course is about, and what I think really how I like to teach now, is I'm looking for what my options are. And then I practice the crap out of it. Play over this track a million times, because one thing that happens to me on this track sometimes is I just kind of get into it and I lose track of where I am. So the G7 is the way it ends the first time, and the E7 is the way it ends the second time. So every once in a while I'll forget and I'll have turned it around in my head. So being aware of what's going on around you as well is super important. So, all right, so the course is on sale. It goes on sale tomorrow. And what I'm really psyched about, I've got my channel launching soon working on the new website. And I'm really psyched to be announcing that, you thought this was a call-in show. Very funny. Jason, I told my friends to start calling me now just to mess with me. So what happened? Sorry, I got thrown off there. It's pretty funny. All right, so we're launching a new website and getting my channel launched. And Throwback is going to be doing a giveaway. So I'm looking forward to that in launching of this course, the new channel, and the new website. So Throwback Pickups are going to be doing a giveaway. And you can win any set you want, whether it's a set of humbuckers, a set of Strat pickups, or a set of Tele pickups. So whatever guitar you've got, you could win a set of Throwbacks from the wonderful people at Throwback Electronics. That's coming up really soon, so keep an eye on that. All right, and also, of course, everybody who's helped with the tip jar, I always really appreciate it. So let's see if there's any questions besides the call-in show. I like that it happened. So yeah, so I go and read online about how you turn off your phone ringing on your desktop if it was on from a call earlier, and I followed all of it, and it didn't take. So it's great, live TV. Okay, let's see what we have. Only 39 people today. I wonder what's going on. Are there people going back to work? Is that what's going on? Hopefully, we'll see. All right, so here we go. Any questions? So, right, Roman legions, you're playing the changes. So yes, I am playing the changes. In a lot of my courses, I've got chord tone soloing and playing the changes and things like that. That's always what I'm thinking. And above all, I'm thinking about creating a melody. And I find when you're thinking in terms of pentatonic scales or just licks, you're not thinking in terms of melody. You're thinking about what's in that scale. And when you start to hear those chord tones and target those chord tones, melodies start to really create themselves. Pretty much any melody is a chord tone, right? So if you're thinking of a song, if I'm playing a B minor chord, you're probably not going to sing a G note. Maybe you are. Maybe you got these great ears that you can hear that, but that's not what I'm hearing. So normally about any song, you're going to be playing a chord tone, which is the root, the 3, or the 5, sometimes the 7. 7th in this case, because we're playing a 7th chord. So if I start to add those into the mix and, like I said, break everything down, it really just makes everything so much easier to me. 5-watt world. Hey, Keith, what's going on? Thanks for chiming in as always. S.E. Nesbitt, everybody who is always here. Bevy, thanks for being here. Beebe. Jason for giving me a hard time. Now he's going to probably start calling. All right. See if we have any questions. When I hear the changes, this is from Tominette, I hear the notes I want to play in my head for each change. I need to make sure that you can locate them on the fretboard. Yeah. So that's the concept, and there's a bunch of ways to do it, and I feel like it's really overwhelming. Jason and I, Lachlan have talked about this a lot, that I'm not thinking about scales anymore. I just kind of know what the notes, I know what key we're in, and I can see it that way. But I'm not thinking about scale tones. I'm thinking about chord tones. And then the surrounding notes to me are usually from the scale. I just found for years if I just started playing a scale, it just sounded like me just playing a scale, which is not what I wanted. And I felt like I was really missing something. And I was missing chord tones, hitting the right notes at the right time. Okay. You may have, okay, how am I getting my distortion here? Good question. My overdrive, it's an amp plugin from Apollo. It's Universal Audio. It's the Universal Audio Buxom Betty plugin. So it's just the amp overdrive from the plugin, which I find it's really the easiest to play over live in this situation. The aux and the amps are great, but this is just the most control right at my fingertips. I turn it on and boom, we're ready to go. And not turning my amps up to get the overdrive and using up the tubes. Okay, so okay, this is a Toronto. If we're in B minor, what's the G7 doing? Is it some kind of substitution? What kind of substitution is that? Okay, and that's also in why does the F work? So those are both kind of connected. So, well, if you think about this, we're in B minor, right? Well, I guess you call it a secondary dominant. Back to the 4, back to the 1. There could be a theoretical answer to it. Mine has always been, yes, it's secondary dominant, but I just always look at it as it sounds cool. When you're writing songs, I don't necessarily think about it that way. I just look at it like, oh, that sounds really nice. And I think he's probably looking at it where he's hearing this line. Or, that adds a little more sauce to it. Now, why is the F in there? Well, the F is the two ways we can look at this. On the G7 chord, the F is in there because it's in the chord, G, B, D, F. And also we can look at it as a blue note, which it is. In the key of B minor or B minor pentatonic scale, the F is the flat 5, and it's just a really nice timbre, right? It's a really great sound. Especially when you do on that G7 chord. Or even the G note, the root in there. Look at that. Look at that little line. So I'm going to go right up the G7 chord. Now it's not here, but we can play it. Get bluesy there, so. All right, so it's really nice there, especially on the G7 chord, because I'm playing the chord, adding in that F. All right, so hopefully that answers that question. That's why does the F work? You're high on burger fat, and your drive-thru reopened today. All right. Any guidance on ear training and being able to hear or anticipate the chord tones coming up as you play them through the changes? This is from David Skinner. That's a great question. Yeah, one of the main things I do is I make sure I know the chord progression beforehand, which may seem kind of obvious, but it's definitely the truth, right? It's really important to know what the changes are. I don't really love being in a situation where I don't know. I don't know what the chord changes are. So it's experience. If you get on a gig and somebody calls a song and there's chord changes you don't know, I take my time and try to see the chord changes over. And a lot of it's just a lot of practice and experience. But if I'm familiar with the song, I'm going to got to be going right. You heard the whole song right there, right? That F sharp to the D. Sorry, B minor, the F sharp right there. Then the A. I'm going to bring down to the E for that G7. So I'm going to find all those lines, and then my ear starts to hear them. You start to hear a little bit of that chromaticism that's built into that chord progression. Hopefully that will answer that. But it's a great question, David. Thanks. All right. Throwbacks are the bomb. I agree. And yeah, I have the throwbacks. Jason talk about the throwbacks in my Les Paul. Yeah, I've got them in pretty much every guitar that does not have vintage pickups in them, and I think they're spectacular. Really, really love their stuff. Really, really great stuff. Okay. Gray Moss, you appear to have a very light touch. Are you leaving room for heavy dynamic picking or just taking it easy on your hands? No, that's a great question. Man, that's a big question, and it's a really good one. I'm always trying to think as dynamically as possible, and this comes from watching all my favorite players. You know, you've got the guy I feel like I really mainly learned a lot of these ideas from is Jeff Beck, who's super dynamic. And look, anybody who, in my mind, who's a really good player is going to be dynamic. So it's across the board. I mean, you've got an overdriven guitar, but if I play softly, right, I can get a different sound altogether. Right, so if I hit harder, play softer, it's going to make the guitar speak much more. And that's just anybody who's, I look for it in any guitar player. And that's why, like playing with a lot of gain, it compresses your sound so much that you lose the dynamics, which makes, to me, guitar playing the way you want it to be, right? I mean, Albert King, you know, you hear him play, it's all very dynamic. So all the guys, like everybody who's been on the show, is a dynamic player, and that's what I look for. So I practiced it, though. It's something you want to practice like anything else. Right? So I practice being dynamic when I play. Sorry about the buzz, you know, these old New York City. It's kind of funny. Certain times a day is not too bad. And then other times a day, suddenly it's like there's like somebody must be turning on a giant compressor next door or something like that. So you get that. It can be worse, but it's not right now. It isn't. That's just great. Hey Richard, how you doing, man? You have a great tone. Are you going direct into your amp, or do you use any pedals? Like I said, this is directly into a plugin, the Apollo UA plugin. But I think, you know, kind of hopefully my tone is very similar between if I'm playing into a plugin or I'm playing into a real amp. At least that's what I go for. I think I sound the same on almost everything that's reasonably decent, you know. And I've worked really hard at my tone. And so how do you work really hard at your tone? Well, I think I talk about it on all my courses, and I talk about it all the time. It's the tone is in your hands. So when you're practicing, I'll do things like, you know, where do I want to pick on the guitar? Here. Back here. So I go in the bridge pickup back there. Right, all over. So I'll think about that stuff. Or am I going to use my pick or my fingers? Right? Two different sounds if I use my pick and fingers, or if I just use a pick, or just use my fingers. So that's three different sounds. And one thing you probably notice is I'm always moving around, messing with my volume knob, and to a lesser extent, but sometimes my tone knob, because that is super huge in terms of dialing in the feel of the guitar and how much overdrive you get. Now, interestingly, Robin, when he plays, he doesn't touch his volume knob at all. His dynamics are strictly from his hands, which is kind of crazy, as opposed to, say, like Jeff Beck or Michael Landau, who's always moving stuff, changing pickups and moving the volume knob. And there's no way that's right or wrong or better than the other. It's just you're interactive with your instrument. And that's important. I think it was, Matt Schofield was talking about it when he was on the show, and we've talked about this a lot. He plays really loudly, not because he wants to play loud, but he plays very dynamically. So if somebody else plugs in his guitar and says, "Hey, you want to sit and grab the guitar?" If you're not used to playing with a lot of volume, because you want to get dynamic, it's really difficult. So these are, once again, there's things that I think about, and when I pay a lot of attention to when I'm listening to great guitar players. That's one of the things that I would think about. The tone is largely coming from my hands, and that comes through a lot of work, and being really conscientious of that. Okay. All right, we got that. Where's that work? This is Rohit Garg. How can one approach or practice to develop their own unique style? Well, it's a good question. You want to find something that you're good at. You know, like what speaks to you about. That's fine. Let me think about that one. Okay, I find like players who I lean or gravitate towards. Let's just say, you know, Jeff Beck was one, or David Gilmour. I see more melodic players, for lack of a better word. And I really would gravitate. What I loved about them, besides the melodicism, is their vibrato, for instance. So I would work on vibrato, and vibrato is one of those things that really differentiates one guitar player from another. There's harmonic stuff and what you play, but I can tell somebody's vibrato, who they are, by their vibrato. Like, Stevie Ray Vaughan is very particular vibrato, and Hendrix, and that's a quick way, it's a lot of work, to start to develop your own sound. Because you can sound pretty bad if you have out-of-tune vibrato, but to me, I know a lot of my friends playing from their vibrato. So that's the first thing to start about. And then it's a lot of practice. Doing what I'm doing, like jamming along with tracks, kind of stealing ideas from other people. And some people say, "Oh, I don't want to steal ideas from other people because I'm going to sound like them." I love Mark Knopfler, but good luck trying to sound like him. I'm going to have to work really hard to get that, Hey, I'm just got a note. Some people saying the 25% code is not working on the new course. I okayed that with TrueFire. I'm going to text them right now because I okayed that. So let me see what's up with that. So let me see what's up. Ugh. I'm waiting here. Okay, I'm going to get an answer. All right, thanks, guys. I want to sort that up because I appreciate you're going to try to buy it, and I want to try to get you that 25% code. So I'll get you that as quickly as possible. Thank you for letting me know that. Okay. Jason Lachlan, I think you missed it. It's Lions by Dire Straits from their first record, same chord progression, which I really dug because it's got some nice changes in it. All right. Okay, this is from Richard. I'm gonna Svorensenhau. Excuse my horrible pronunciation of your name. Did you learn all the chord tones on the fingerboard? Yes, I've spent a lot of time memorizing the names of the notes on the neck, of course, and what notes are in what chord. And a way to do that, a really great way to do that, is to write them out. To say, okay, C major, C E G. C minor, C E flat G, C E flat G flat. Now you play a C major chord, and then where's your C, E, and G? Well, C, G, C, E. Okay, C. There's my E flat. Then we want diminished. We have to lower the 5. So you go through each note and each chord tone. But the coolest way to do it is to take it off of the fingerboard first. Just memorize it in your head, what notes are in what chord. Because then when you want to put on the fingerboard, you're not trying to kill two birds with one stone. That's what worked for me. Memorize how to spell the chords in the key of C major first. So the major 7, C major 7, D minor 7, D F A C, E minor 7, E G B D. Because any kind of C chord is always going to be some sort of C, E, G, and B. Whether it's C dominant 7, which is C, E, G, B flat. So you see, I've memorized them. it's just I call it kind of monkey work, you know. Okay, so it is apparently we are up and running. I'm live now. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, I think it's working now. TrueFire right on top of the ball. Thank you guys. So yeah, if you want to go back and try it again, it should be working. And if not, please let me know. And all right, thanks. Okay. Sorry about that. Doing all this at once. So I've memorized. So I've memorized everything off of the fingerboard first, because then I'm doing away with trying to figure out on the neck. Okay, what is C major 7 again? C, E, G, B. And then what I want to do next is do it up and down one string at a time. So C major 7 on one string. B, C, E, G, B, C, E, G. And then same in reverse. G, E, C, B, G, E, C, B. Right? And I start to do that just like we did earlier on with the pentatonic scales. You're just starting to see the guitar horizontally as well as vertically. But any way that you can get you there is an important way to do it, okay? All right. Good question here. What chord tones do you look at? This is Devin. With chord tones, do you look at scales that aren't chord tones? Well, you're seeing as passing tones. Yeah, if there's a, right. Let me phrase that in a way that I think I would like to explain it. If there is a chord or a note that's not in the chord, but it's in the scale, I see it as a scale tone, but in my mind, I almost see it as a passing tone. Some of them sound good, like a 9. You want to experiment with all of them. And so at certain times, they start to register as like, oh, I know that's a 9 is usually a good note on a minor chord. It's a pretty sound. So I know that from playing a lot. Anything that's outside of the scale, like what we call a chromatic note. Technically, a chromatic note means just a note that's outside of a scale. So if I have a note that's a true passing tone to me is going to be a chromaticism, like a blue note, right, or something, or this natural 7, which sounds cool, but not if you sit on it, right? So if I play that natural 7, but you know, terrible note, but right. So if I kind of just blow over it and add a little chromaticism, that to me I see as a passing note. And then some scale tones, like if I'm on the B minor, we know that G on its own just ain't a great choice. So I'll see that as a passing tone. I'll just kind of play it and get off of it really quickly, although it's a scale tone. Still thinking about chord tones. That's the main thing. And everything else, in a certain way, is just ways to dance around the chord tones. That's the way I'm kind of seeing that. Okay. Cool new hat. Thanks. It's actually not new. Who can get a hat right now, right? Okay. Roman Legions. You always dial in your clean tone just to the point of hair. Yes, I do. I always dial it in where you're just going to get a little bit of that, you know, breakup, because if I roll back my volume, I get a clean tone. The louder I am, well, I don't play with a lot of overdrive anyway. And then I find, obviously, like the louder you are, sometimes even the less drive I'll use, because the amp might help me to get to that point. But yeah, I don't like playing with a lot of overdrive, and I don't like playing perfectly clean. Excuse me, I can't stand playing perfectly clean. And what I love about, well, you know, here's the thing. If you're playing through a good tube amp and you're loud and you're not breaking up yet, but you're getting right to that point, the amp starts working with you. Like, that's what I love about the two rocks so much. The clean tones feel almost like they have overdrive on them on the way that they react. And any good tube amp, like a deluxe reverb, like a good one or anything, get that kind of sound. And when I'm using plugins and pedals, I'm trying to emulate that as best I can. But yeah, I like it to the point of just kind of breaking up, because if you're playing blues and rock, right? So bring in my volume knob. Right, that kind of thing. Okay. Could you use a D? This is from Tarcisio Diaz Vieira. Could you use a D major Ionian mode with this track? Yeah, well, yes. Well, if you think about it, D major is also the same as B minor. So yeah, I wouldn't think of it as D major because I'm not centering around D major. If that makes sense, my tonal center is B minor. It's not D major. So that's a big difference in sound and the way I think about it. If I want to play a scale, if I'm thinking scale-wise. Once again, you have to be careful on that E chord because it does contain the G sharp, which is no longer in D major. It would be in A major, and then suddenly the chord progression would change to B Dorian. But what I'm thinking, it kind of brings me back to the point. I'm not necessarily thinking a scale. I'm thinking pentatonic, like I talk about in the Solo Explorer. Like, okay, we know pentatonic, so we're going to kind of play over that and dig into that. We're going to have fun with that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is start to add in notes from the chords, which inevitably will give me a scale, but I'm not going to think about them as a scale. I'm going to think of it as notes that I could add into my pentatonic scale that are going to be the right notes at the right time for the chord. So you're really just playing kind of mind games with this. It's a mixture of pentatonic scales and chord tones. But I found when I started thinking that way, I got away from thinking about modes and scales, and that made me play better. I think it just made me much more musical, much more melodic. I understood the guitar better. I just wasn't thinking this one scale should fit over everything and how come this note doesn't work at the right time. So I really liked this course. I was watching over it. Excuse me, I like all my courses, obviously. But I really liked this one. I felt like as I went through it, you have to watch it and then write the text and okay everything. I felt pretty good. I was thinking, no, this is really the way I think about soloing over rock tunes. So I hope you guys really dig it. So a lot of the stuff that you've enjoyed, you've been really vocal on here and in emails about what I'm talking about here. You really are. That's what this course is a lot like. All right. Okay. Do you find when you get older, you muck with your guitar tone and volume controls more? Yeah, totally. I do because it is part of the guitar. Like, yeah, I look for that. When I was younger, it was just kind of like, you multi-channel amps. You go to the clean tone. Your clean tone, you turned off your distortion. I never turned down my volume. I never touched my tone. And everything was based upon what pedal I was stepping on for different levels. And I realized that none of my favorite players really play that way. I think it's a much more, lack of a better word, mature way to play. All right. What was this? A question here? Can you give some exercises on using chord tones? This is Jonathan Blank. Using chord tones and arpeggios along with scales. Well, I kind of just, I don't mean to be sarcastic, I kind of just did. What I'm thinking about is the notes of the chord. I see the chord, I play the chord. I'm going to play it like B minor, right? Here's my D, my A, into G. And I'm going to find those notes inside the scale there, or my B minor pentatonic as the home bass, and I'm going to start to target some of those notes that are outside. Technically, those can be seen as arpeggios. The problem with the term arpeggio is it has the implication of, playing the whole thing through. And so it's semantics, but I'm just playing the chord tones, and I'm not thinking of it as an arpeggio. I'm just thinking about targeting the right notes. So how I would practice this is put on a track like this, plan out, know what the chord progression is, and target certain notes at certain times. And then use a home bass thing, like I said, of B minor pentatonic. And this is really largely what rock players do. I mean, all of them. It's kind of the pentatonic-y blues thing that makes it rock, and then hitting the right notes. And Jimmy Page is great at that. I'm listening to Solo in 10 Years Gone, or just he gets those chord changes. And like John Mayer, same thing. Just got that kind of bluesy background, but he's making those chord changes. And even if it's still in the same key, he just knows what notes are in what chord because he's a good guitar player. That's what it comes down to. Like, all my friends do this. It's not like I've got some sort of secret thing and only I know it. It's any of my accomplished guitar player friends are thinking this way. Very few of my friends, especially when you're playing kind of music I like to, or blues rock, or those kind of things, nobody's really just thinking a straight scale. Most of us are thinking, well, we know it's a scale, but we're also thinking about those chord tones as they go by. Okay. Yes, and you get the 25% off automatically by using the URL, I believe. That's what I think. Okay, I believe. Joe Razamasa. You love my TrueFire chords. Thank you. Can you tell us what is for you the best strat tone? Clean and dirty, recordist artem. Oof, okay. Best strat tone. I love Richie Blackmore's strat tone. Man, I love his guitar tone. Hendrix. For strat, it's Hendrix, you know. Stevie Vaughan for sure. You know, that's one of the consummate strat tones, but for me, it's got to be Hendrix. Yeah, it's Hendrix. Yeah. Bold as Love, I think that's just got some of the greatest tones. And you know, one thing I am pretty careful of when I'm playing a strat is that you can play them and the tone of them makes you sometimes play a certain way, right? Because you're doing, you know, like it just suddenly sounds like Hendrix because you got that neck pickup and it just sounds like that. And that was one thing. It's funny. We'll bring it up. When I did the record with Robin, he asked me not to play a Stratocaster. And I've talked about this in the past. I've gone kind of full circle because he had a good point. I was playing very Stratocaster stuff. And he felt like, well, I think when you play a Les Paul, I feel like your voice sounds more like your own when you're playing a Les Paul. And I knew what he meant. In other words, I didn't rely on some of the, I didn't rely on the Strat-isms as much as I used to rely on them more than I do now, if that makes sense. He's like, yeah, man, you sound great, but it sounds kind of like Hendrix. And he means that in the sense of like, well, why do you want to sound like Hendrix? And sometimes it's hard, you know, you got a Strat and you're playing to a Marshall and you've got a Univibe. You're going to sound like Hendrix or Robin Trower. So I love Mark Knopfler's Strat tone. I mean, like Sultans of Swing and that first record, just spectacular. That sound is great. What I love about Jeff Beck, pretty much everything, is he plays a Strat, but he doesn't sound like he's playing a Strat in the sense that Steve Ray Vaughan sounds like he's playing a Strat, or Mark Knopfler in the early records. He doesn't sound like a Strat to me. The only thing that makes it sound like a Strat to me is that he's using the tremolo. But in terms of the tone, when he goes to the neck pickup, it doesn't have that thing that I'm getting right now. Now, one thing, just about Strats too, to get that sound, I'm hitting hard. But when I play softer, it doesn't have that same kind of thing. And what I love about Strats is when you hit them hard, they get that snap, even on the bridge. Right? So on a desert island, for me, I'm a Strat guy. I love my Les Paul and Tellys, love them. But if somebody said, well, one guitar, it would be a Strat. Also, I'm just so used to where the controls are on this stuff. That works great for me. Okay. All right, so this is from M2E Baseman. Andy in Plymouth, England. Love your courses and have most of them in Corey's. So what's the best way to learn the fretboard? Well, one string at a time. Yeah, I would say one string at a time. Learning scale fingering is essential, and you need to do that. But it's one string at a time is when I really just started to learn the fingerboard. And if you're on here for the first time, maybe go back to my pentatonic deep dive and you start digging into that. And that's one way I started looking through the scale and seeing it all in one string at a time. And that was a perfect way for me to get through it. Okay. And Corey's great. Yeah, of course. He's oh my God. Okay, David Dare Parker, I have to get Jeff Beck online as my lockdown chat. Yeah, that would be cool, right? I would love to have him on there. I can't imagine that happening. Okay, thank you. Would you have learned the chord tones when you would begin to listen to, after how to get great players using the chord tones? Okay. Okay, thanks. When you have learned the chord tone, would you then begin to listen after how great players are using chord tones to create melodies? What you probably find is that once you learn the chord tones, you're going to start to hear the melodies in the song. There's one of the songs in the course, I do kind of a thing on Echoes by Pink Floyd, that same kind of chord progression. Outlining that. And it's funny, the melody I played in, I know it's coming up with my own melody, I ended up, that's coming up with something that I felt was very similar to King Crimson's Epitaph, showing my age here on all these classic rock tunes, but hey, I love classic rock. And so the chord progressions become very familiar, and then you start going through the chord tones, you go, oh, that's just the same kind of song as this. And things become very familiar, so the more you know the chord tones, the more you realize you've always known them internally or innately. You just didn't know where they were on the guitar. And that's really cool. It's not something you haven't heard before. It's something you've heard a million times. You just haven't figured out where it was on the instrument yet. Okay. Frank Vignola has a very good course called Modern Method for Guitar. Everything Frank does is great. He's just great. Do I conceive of blues soloing and rock soloing as different? Yeah, I do actually. Since rock can be a bit more modal, right? We don't change keys, but we can actually nail some chord tones, right? But we're not changing keys. So I'm going to focus in on that. And now in the blues, I'm still thinking chord tones, but we end up, if you're looking at a blues, if you have 3 dominant 7th chords, you're changing keys 3 times technically. So what I'll do is I'll start to expand on these concepts and dig into that and take more advantage of that sound. When you start to do that, you start to sound like the guys that I grew up listening to or that I love, or you sound like the way I approach blues, which is going to be coming from more that jazzier-based school. Robin Ford, that's where I learned most of that stuff from, and he's pretty unique, of course. And then all the people, in my mind, all the people who came after him after he opened up that sort of sound. Because it's a bit of jazz. It's not full-on jazz. I mean, you hear Pat Metheny play a blues, and it's mind-blowing, but it's not the kind of blues I play or am able to play. So mine's coming more from like that Robin Ford thing, Larry Carlton, a little bit more that fusion-y, rock-based, yet making some chord changes and adding in some extra harmony. Sometimes when you add in more harmony that doesn't exist in the chords like you can do in jazz, and you do that in rock, it just kind of sounds stupid. You have to know the genre. That's super important. You have to know the genre you're playing. You have to know the gig. I remember playing with a very traditional blues band. We did some touring. I went to Hong Kong with them. It was a ton of fun. And they were very traditional, real 1-4-5. And a little bit of hubris on my part, and I'm trying to throw in all this stuff. They kind of gave me the look like, what are you doing? And I listened back to some recordings, and I sounded kind of like an idiot. They weren't following, and it wasn't their concept. So me doing that was just stupid. So it didn't fit. So sometimes trying to make too much stuff work is not a great idea. All right, so a few more questions, then we're going to wrap it up because we're on the hour, and I appreciate everyone being here. Everybody hanging in. All right. What first electric guitar would you get? You're learning, and you have an acoustic, and any suggestions? Yeah, a Telecaster. Why wouldn't I get a Stratocaster? It's a good question. You might say a Strat. Teles are great because they don't have a bridge, like the floating bridge. They don't have to worry about tuning or anything with the bridge. You just kind of put it away. Teles have got 2 pickups. They're just the simplest guitar, but they're just an amazing guitar. And I love Telecasters. I just am more comfortable overall for the years. I've always played Stratocaster, so I'm just the most physically comfortable on that. But someone said, what's the first electric to get? Would be a Telecaster. The Mexican made a lot of lower end Telecasters and Stratocasters. Lower end Fenders are very good guitars. Just look for one that's maybe not super, super heavy. That's all. Pick them up, try a bunch, go to the store if you can try a few of them. If we can go to a store and try them. Because sometimes the less expensive ones can be very heavy, and most of my favorite Telecasters have not been heavy. Sometimes the ones you can get at stores are like 9 pounds, and that's a bummer. When you got to stand up with that. Okay. This is 421 EI. When you practice, do you use the same or different progressions? Keys 145, 2651, and do you use a looper? Yeah, well, what I'll do is I'll just take any chord progression that I want to work on, and then I'm going to just beat it up, right? Just keep on working through it. And I use a looper. A looper is a great tool because my mind is anytime you have to set anything up, I'm not going to do it. So my guitars are always out on stands or else they don't get played. If I have a pedal and it's not out, I don't really use pedals that much anyway. If they're not out, I'm not going to use it. And so if I don't have a looper out, I'm not going to use it, and I'll lose some valuable time. If I want to practice something, I don't want to go into Logic and program it and try to do that. I'll just hit my looper and loop it and just go through it. And you ask how I would do it. The same way I've described and the same way I'm describing in my Solo Explorer course, 25% off of TrueFire now, launches tomorrow. This is it. I think about, okay, I'm going to take the pentatonic scale and work through that because that's home base. And then I'm going to take apart the chord progression. I'm going to say, okay, what are my chords? What notes of my chords are in the pentatonic scale? Okay, let me map that out. What are my notes in all my chords? What notes are not in the pentatonic scale? Okay, I'm going to map that out. How do they relate to my pentatonic scale? And the reason I come back to the pentatonic scale is because we're guitar players. Like I said, it's just easiest. We play pentatonic scales all the time. So why not think that way for now? And that's the way I think about it. I can start taking shit out and doing all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I bring it back to a pentatonic scale because it's just my roots, and that's what it's supposed to sound like to me. Okay. Aria, hey, man, how's it going? Thank you. Thanks for being here. I'm glad you enjoyed the lesson. Okay. So Keith over 5 Watt World. Yeah. I'm dyslexic enough to not be able to always think of the note names, but I found working on arpeggio shapes and hence the intervals last year has really helped me. Yeah, of course. There's, it's any way you can get to it, right? If you have to practice, if you see it as arpeggio shapes and you start seeing these shapes, as long as it gets you to where you need to be, and as long as you take the time to go, okay, that's the third of this chord. Now, brings me to another point. You do want to know what the chord tone is. You want to know the name of the note, but you also want to know how it exists in the chord. I'm playing the third, I'm playing the fifth, I'm playing the root, whatever. And if you watch the interview I did with Robin, I really appreciated something he said when he's like, do you know what it is you're going to play before you play it? Do you hear all this stuff? He's like, no, I don't. Anybody who says that is lying or they're not being really honest. It's like you said, you're driving a car. You're not thinking, well, I'm going to turn here. So I'm not thinking, I'm playing the third, I'm playing the 5, I'm playing the flat 7. But as I practice, and if I want it, I will play that note and register it in my head how it sounds, right? I'm going to say, oh, that's the third. So this is what my third sounds like in this chord. A D. And the third and there's a nice melody, right? Once again. Now 5 to the 5 to the 5 5. Now once again the 5. Yeah, 5. Oh. Right, so I'm playing the fifths. So I will know what that sounds like, or kind of what it sounds like ahead of time, because I've gone, okay, that's the fifth. That's what the fifth sounds like in a chord. That's what the third sounds like. That's what the flat 7 sounds like. And it doesn't happen overnight, but the coolest thing is, I promise you, the more you keep on doing it, the more it starts to happen. And that's the greatest thing. You ever guys, you've had that. You're trying to figure something out, or you hear somebody play something, you're like, I know what that is. I just heard it for the first time. I know exactly what that is. So for me, that's where this is all going. All right. Why would you want to sound like Hendrix? Because he is great. Yeah, I wouldn't. Right. You know what I mean. I call guys like Hendrix, like they're like Jupiter, because I'm a science fan, cosmology nut. Corny, stupid, but it's like the greatest center of gravity, get pulled in. But, Jupiter's gravity destroys everything, because Hendrix or Jeff Beck or these guys, they're so strong, they loom so large in everybody's vocabulary that it's easy to get sucked in and want to sound like them because they're so good and so ubiquitous. And then you realize at the end of the day, I'm not me. So, yeah, I'd love to have the creativity of Hendrix, but yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody, for the tip jar. Thank you for, if you ordered the course, thanks, we got that sorted out. I really appreciate it. It's how I make my living. And if you order it through the link below, I get a larger percentage, and I appreciate that as well. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the like button. That would be really awesome. I would really appreciate that as well. All these YouTube algorithms. Super thanks and to Keith Williams from 5 Watt World, who outside here has been super helpful. What a great guy. Please go, if you're not part of 5 Watt World, join his. And a big thanks to Rick Beato, who has been really super supportive and helpful with me. Another great guy. So I want to thank Rick so much for his input on all of this, and like Keith, invaluable guidance. Shirts are coming soon. All right. And King Crimson rules. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. All right, just one more. Okay, yes, Imano, if I don't like the Les Paul, I will send it to you for sure. Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And I will see you on Saturday morning. We have Scott Sherrard is going to be here at 11 a.m. Scott is a great guitar player. Matt Gibson, how you doing, man? Hey, Miguel, what's up? Scott's a great guitar player. We played with Greg Allman for quite some time. And he plays guitar in Little Feat, or just got that gig working with them. And unfortunately for him, the lockdown happened. But Scott's a great guitar player. He will be here, and plenty to learn from him. And then the following week is Andy Wood. And then the following week is Josh Smith. And then we have Jason Laughlin making the return, which I'm looking forward to as always. And then who's else? Kirk Fletcher is going to do it, and Shane Terrio. We got some other people coming on. So it's a lot of great people. So once again, everyone, thank you so much. And thank you, Phil, for all the help you've been doing here moderating. And I'll see you guys soon. Thanks.